You can tell that one of our goals here is to catch the incredible conversation, words, wisdom, experience, fun of having these three guests with us today. So I'm just going to quickly introduce them. Chuck Nice, actor, comedian, co-talk star,
Co-talk star. Ladies and gentlemen, co-talk star.
Yeah, thank you. He's the co-talk star with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And just climate activist, did 10,000 teachers.
10,000 teachers?
Yes,
and
just
it's real.
Yeah, it's real, which if you say fast is funny. Kasha Patel is here with us from DC, a science journalist, just came in from Mexico City doing a story on
total solar eclipse and water issues separately.
Yes, yeah. And comedian, does a lot with science, comedy in the DC area, really finding new ground and new audiences. It's really amazing. And Raleigh Williams, otherwise known as Rolly Williams, is here from New York City.
Why confuse them?
No, I know, I won't confuse you. Here, lives in Brooklyn, New York City, actor, activist, has Climate Town, which has so many followers, we can't count that high. It's a YouTube channel and really his own media company after getting a graduate degree in climate science and policy. Yeah.
And $70,000 of student loan debt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay.
You're not a co-talk star.
That's true.
This is brought to you by Inside the Greenhouse. We have with us, Phaedra Pazzullo is here with us, Max Boykoff is here with us. I am one of the people, Becca Safran is not here, but she's another one of these. And we thank the Argosy Foundation for making all this possible and for bringing our incredible guests here. So this is a workshop. We're going to have each person kind of guide us in some kind of embodied thing, and then we're going to dissolve into kind of a conversation about how to approach climate comedy in a way that we really bring together and benefit from the art and science of climate change. So we're going to start out with Chuck, just because Chuck's sitting right here.
Yes.
And Chuck is amazing. So we're going to start with Chuck, and Chuck's going to guide us in something.
I think one of the things, wow, this is going to take a long time.
It's all right. We want to know each other.
So it's going to be, we're going to do a 1-minute exercise, and this is primarily lensed with the idea of focusing what you want to say. So one of the things when it comes to climate communication, especially when you're talking about the vast subject that is the climate crisis, climate change itself, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint what you want to say about the issue because it is so big. We were having breakfast this morning and I brought up the fact that even from an astronomical standpoint, we studied Venus because Venus has a runaway greenhouse effect going on right now. And so one of the ways that we're able to see ourselves when it comes to greenhouse gases and the proliferation thereof is to look at a planet where it's gone off the rails. So that's just how big climate is. So what are you going to talk about? Raleigh just talked about in his degree in, I almost said Rolly. No, but I told you. Anyway.
Sorry, there's we have a straight part of a circle and it's like cutting off some sight lines.
He wants it to be more rolly.
So.
Is this okay for the cameras? By the way? Sorry, Dad.
So, he just mentioned policy. So, when you talk about climate change, that is a whole nother facet as to, how our governments, how are we as a people or a nation of laws going to deal with the idea of climate change? Well, it takes policymakers to be involved in that. I mean, this is just how expansive this subject is. And so when considering how big it is, you always have to consider what do you want to say? And what you want to say may change depending upon who you're talking to. So for instance, if I'm talking to a group of high schoolers, I don't want to talk about policy. when it comes to climate. You know, I may not even want to talk heavily about the science involved in climate. What are they going to be, what's going to resonate with them most? If you're talking about high schoolers, it's probably going to be the future. It's probably going to be the environment. It's probably going to be lifestyle. How is my life going to be affected? So that would automatically cull the way I'm going to approach the issue. And so I want to do a quick exercise on how to bring large focus down to laser-like focus. So this is 1 minute. You're going to have 1 minute. Some of you are going to have a lot more than 1 minute because we're going to be going around, okay? So you'll have a little bit more, but we don't want it to be more than 1 minute because you're not allowed to take too much time to think about what I'm about to ask you to do. So you don't have a lot of time. You have 60 seconds, and then on top of that, you have to be, you don't have to be. It works better if you are completely honest, which does require a certain amount of vulnerability. So here's what I want you to do.
Pause. People look very scared right now. People like, I do not want to do this.
Yeah, I'm glad you're scared. Now if you cry, guess what? I will drink your tears, and it's just sustain me. Okay, anyway. Okay, so here's what I want you to do, okay? All right. I want you to think about who you are. All of your totality, the totality of who you are, and then sum that up in one word. Wow, I saw a lot of people go, okay? And we are starting now. So you have 60 seconds right now to think about who you are. And remember, this one word is going to tell us the totality of who you are. And it don't try to impress, that's all I can say. And normally whatever pops into your mind first is probably the closest, you know, because subconsciously you know yourself better than you do consciously. So whatever popped in first. So here we go, that was 41. We have 20 seconds left. So, a minute is a long time. Okay, and all right, we're gonna stop it now. Who wants to go first? No, you know, since we did this at breakfast, I'm gonna go ahead and go first, and then we can start and go around from there. Okay, we'll go this way?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. So it's one word, my one word. And when I said it at breakfast, my wife was there and she went, "What?" And my one word is unsure. Yeah, believe it or not, I am unsure about most things in my life. And I don't think it's a bad thing, I actually think it's a good thing. So unsure.
Loving.
Loving, how convenient. No, I'm joking.
Dedicated.
Creative.
Majestic.
Whoa!
Yes.
Right on.
Yes. Good job.
Coalescing.
Right.
Human.
Nice.
Curious.
Good word.
Large. Adventurous.
Intrigued.
Excitable.
That's so cool. I mean, and it's so funny because, you know, I heard one word repeated, which is pretty cool too, you know, but just think about this. So when we think about who we are, first of all, you know, does anyone really know themselves, you know, and how well do you know yourself? These are all questions that we explore pretty much daily without even realizing it, you know, who am I? It's a big, big question. And to be able to think about that and cull it down to one word, you know, really takes a great deal of focus. And whatever process, everybody does that process differently. And whatever process that is, you know, you can apply that when you're talking about climate and communication, because it is very difficult to convey this message by trying to talk about the issue. It's one issue that is attached to every part of life and will continue to have its tendrils reach into even more parts of our lives as it becomes exacerbated and as we start to have solutions. And I'll just end with the most exciting thing about the climate crisis is that we are living in a 19th century economy. This economy is built on 19th century technology. So think about this economy. What drives it? Two things, electricity and oil, right? So that's 19th century. And everyone in this room has the ability, no matter what it is that you're going to do, whether you're in the climate sciences or earth sciences or not, you have the ability to help this world move into a 21st century economy. And the 21st century economy will be driven by the green technology. Green technology will drive the entire world economy going forward for the next 200 years. And we are a part of it. So that is the most exciting thing for me, is to know that the world is going to change in such a way for the better that we're in the transition period now. I'll be dead when the transition is done, you know, not because I won't live that long, just because I really don't think I can take it. No, I'm joking. I'm so dramatic. I'm sorry, guys. That was a dark joke. And I can't help myself when they pop in my head. Jesus, what is wrong with me? But no, the fact is that, you know, that's what's really exciting. And so we're all a part of this. No matter what it is that you do, you are a part of climate. That's all there is to it, and the issue at hand. So that's it. That's my exercise. Thanks.
Nice. Thank you. And I realized I forgot to introduce, for those in the class already know this, but Ben and I are the ones teaching the class. Ben Stasny, PhD candidate in theater, focusing on climate. Yay! We had the honor of working with all of these folks on this show. Okay, Kasia, do we want to kick it over to you?
Sure. I think my exercise is going to take more thinking. I'm going to ask you to write a joke, so it's a little harder. I'll give you guys some background. I love what Chuck said. My perspective is I have a science background, science degree and journalism degree. And what I believe is fundamental to being able to take action, whether it's in the climate space or other parts of science, is having good science literacy. And that's not just in science majors, but also in other aspects, whether it's theater, you know, I don't know what else is out there that's not science, economics, whatever, math, all those things.
Whatever bullshit other topics.
I don't remember college. So what my job is I work directly with the public to get them excited about science and teach them things. I also work a lot with researchers. And when they hear you're a science comedian, they get very scared because comedy is a very difficult thing to do, but everyone has the capacity to do it if you put in the effort, and everyone can write at least one good joke with a lot of thinking and trial and error and so forth. So the exercise that I like to give, we can use it with climate change, but I also work with researchers from a lot of different fields. So you can use your own field, astrophysics, environmental studies, dentistry, whatever you want to do. But the sentence, it's very easy. It's an analogy. You've heard this format a lot of times. It's blank is a lot like my grandpa because. So the example that I do with climate change people, climate change is a lot like my grandpa because. And you know, you can kind of think in your head, the way you would do this is you think of all the things climate change has, all the things your grandpa has, and then you see which ones overlap. An example that I really liked that someone just came up with, you know, within seconds, it doesn't have to be the latest, greatest thing. Climate change is a lot like my grandpa because they both have a lot of gas. So if any brave souls, you don't have to do it right now if you can't think of something, but just like throughout the day or whatever, if you want to raise your hand and give your idea, it's a very safe space here because I just said it's a safe space, and we will promote
Therefore,
you.
it is so.
Exactly.
Do you want to have people do it with partners first and maybe
Oh,
generate?
yeah. If you guys want to get in groups for like a minute or two and just talk it out about what the similarities
good
are.
ones.
Can I try one?
Oh yeah.
All right, I just thought of this. Okay. Climate change is a lot like my grandfather. We all thought it was fine until he hit that retaining wall.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought of one too.
Oh my gosh, they're above average in every way.
Climate change is a lot like my grandpa because, well, they're both racist.
Oh,
You gotta laugh. You can't laugh and then moan. You cannot laugh and then ooh. It's too late. You laughed.
You laughed.
I won. It's over. It was funny. Okay? All right.
there we go. Case in point. It was funny because Chuck said
You
so.
can substitute it with whatever you want. If you want to change climate change, if you want to change grandpa or whatever. But the idea is to take two things that seem very far apart, the farther away they are apart, and the more you can find a similarity, the funnier it will be, ideally.
Okay,
Cool.
groups.
Groups.
Oh, you have one already.
Climate change is a lot like my grandpa because he's sick and doesn't remember who his family is.
That is
Wow.
as hell. Hell yeah.
So dark.
Honestly, big ups. Big ups. That's the initiative we want to see out of you guys.
Yeah, imagination over
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
By the way,
Oh, Will's got it.
Will.
The sun is a lot like my mom. From afar, she's kind of warm and looks very nice. But if you get too close, you'll get burned.
Oh, yeah. Ouch. Nice.
Very nice.
Jaden, is ready.
I'm learning a lot about families.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
We got one back here.
Climate change is a lot like my grandpa because they're both more likely to end up in the Florida Keys.
Hey!
Nice.
That was stellar, my friend. That was really good.
Yeah, loquacious. Way to go.
All right, cool. So let's chop up into little groups here.
Yeah, let's chop in little groups, and we have to each. A group has to come up with one. So get into a group of like 4. Quick.
Do it with 3 or 4.
Okay.
Anybody else?
All right. You can tweet any of your suggestions at us, and we'll give you feedback, maybe. All right. Next is Raleigh.
Hey, all right. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Awesome. Do you need more water? I slammed this one, but I'll be okay for the next, foreseeable.
By the way, we look at the cup, we know it was a Moscow Mule.
Yeah, this came from Beth's office. That's why she seems so chipper after about 4:30. All right. So my little piece of advice is to convey whatever you want to say through your own true personal self. So I think these two are actual stand-ups. I'm kind of dabbling, but part of what makes them good comedians is that they've found their own voice, right? They've kind of chopped off the parts of their act that aren't really true to themselves, and they find a lot of truth in their own perspective. That's why comedians don't just tell whatever jokes, they tell jokes from their own personal point of view, and the funniest jokes are kind of built based in truth and based in personality, I think. So we're gonna break up into groups of 4, and everyone's gonna kind of try to just tell one of their favorite stories that happened to them, about a minute long if you can do it. And I want you to tell it in a way that's as true to yourself as possible. So if it was me, I like to tell very wandering, meandery stories that have a lot of little loops that go nowhere. If I'm trying to tell a climate change story, I'd be all right, my favorite thing about climate change, not my favorite thing, obviously, it's bad, and not my favorite thing ever because there's still Sour Patch Kids and sex and stuff. So this is just my favorite thing about climate change, is that you can often find PDFs of these companies that internal documentation from when they were shit, climate change is real, what are we gonna do? We gotta raise up our oil rigs and we have to create all this ballast around our ships. And then bury the information. And so you can like go back and find PDFs that have these like, actual lines that are directly contradictory to things that their PR people are saying, and then like pull clips of PR people saying a thing and then put the PDF over it. I just love it. I don't know what it is, but it just makes me, like really, really psyched to see this and see the juxtaposition. So that's my favorite thing about climate change. Pretty meandery, not that funny, but that's how I talk to my friends. So what I would like is for you guys to split up into these groups and just think like, it doesn't have to be a climate change story. If it is, it's cool. Maybe just like a story you like to tell at parties or something, but really try to lean into the personality of it so that if one of your friends saw it written down, they would be like, oh, that's Kara. That's like a Kara story, and that's told in a really Kara kind of way. Just like lean into yourself, because that's all people really want to see in communication. Communication comes from people, and people have unique personalities, and that's like really what I think grabs people when you're trying to communicate with them in a way that's not like combative or contradictory. All right, so break up into groups and tell each other very personal stories, I guess. Get vulnerable and let it rip.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's get you guys into groups that haven't been in groups. Chuck, you want to join this group? Kasha, you want to come join a group down here?
Okay, and we're all focused up. Awesome. All right, so one thing that I think we talked about in our group over here was that when you tell a story that's like got your own trappings, like what's going on over here, very cool, love this. When you tell a story with your own unique trappings, you're doing it kind of for yourself as much as for the audience. And I always notice that like the lamest, worst comedy and communication comes from trying to imagine what you think another group of people would think is funny. Right? Like estimating what you think is a funny joke. Like if you're like, I'll do like a Fortnite skins joke here because I think 14-year-old dudes will love this. And they probably won't because you don't know the shit that they know about Fortnite and they don't know what, your life is like. So if you're making a joke that you think is funny, then at the very least, you're not disappointing yourself, one person. So I think it's like, it comes from yourself, and if other people don't like it, that's on them, But if you're like writing for yourself, I think that's where the most genuine and like funny and compelling material comes from. So I want to go around the circle, and who's ever interested in talking, maybe a story that either you told or that you heard somebody else tell, and why you felt like that was a really compelling piece of, media, oral media that you heard today. And I guess I'll start with Jay told a story about a lightning strike hitting, and like everything went white, like it was a grenade went off next to a soldier, and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" And it was a really cool, it like took us all to this little moment of lightning on a 14er. Which 14er? It's always Bierstadt, isn't it? All right, so that was like a cool moment where we were all drawn in by this little piece of story that like anybody who wasn't Jay telling that story, I probably wouldn't have had that kind of moment, and I did. So let's go around and like, if the spirit is moving you to relay a story, please relay it, either yours or somebody else's. And let's start this direction. Sorry.
What if I don't have a story?
I mean, we don't have to have everybody go.
Yeah,
That would
it's
take a long
just
time.
if the spirit's moving you. So is the spirit moving you?
Not as now.
Awesome. And honesty is the best policy. So we can just pass.
I'll pass.
No. Everyone can pass. It's okay.
Yeah. My story was lame. I
showed up. You could say tell my story.
Maybe we should just skip to the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should. This is going to take forever.
Opt-in. It's an opt-in.
Yeah.
Opt-in. All right, Phaedra.
Your story.
My story?
You can't
so
volunteer
good.
other people to
You
tell
didn't
their own
volunteer
story.
criminals.
You tell the story, Phaedra.
I should tell.
No, Phaedra should tell it.
I'm gonna tell your story.
Okay, you tell. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's so much responsibility because they all know you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not.
You're about to get passed by me.
Okay, so I'm catering in New York City, And I don't know who's going to be at this fancy dinner. And I show up for the job. I'm sorry, I'm gonna.
You're beautiful.
I show up for the job, and it ends up the Rothschilds.
Ooh.
Okay, that's the reaction. And it was very fancy, and of course the Rothschilds wanted to be served in the French style, which I've now learned requires having a large fork and a large spoon in your hand, this way, and then a row of lamb. And then you have to pick it up, but they're not like tongues, because tongues are for us lazy Americans. The French keep their utensils separate, and so you have to pick it up carefully and then serve it. And lo and behold, he gets around the table of the Rothschilds and the other fancy people, and all of a sudden looks over and realizes he's about to serve. I'm about to serve. Sorry, lamb to Henry Kissinger. And as I realize that, the lamb juice starts dripping on him. And I put it down, and I go back to the kitchen, and I'm like, I just dripped lamb juice on Henry Kissinger. So cool.
It's a great story. I think we have time for 2 stories more.
Just to clarify, you don't have to retell the story, just something that you liked
That was a great story, though.
about that story. Although that's the kind of story that I did need to hear. So thank you. But just like an element of a story that you liked would be great.
Do we need a Who is Henry Kissinger moment too, or we're good with that?
They looked it up.
Who Henry Kissinger is? Yeah. Look up Vietnam
Honestly,
War.
look it up on your own time. All right, keep it moving.
Fancy people.
Okay, great. Okay, he's good. All right.
Can I tell an element of a story that I
Absolutely.
learned from Laurel? So Laurel said that she likes to go out at night when it's very, very dark because you can see the stars, your eyes have to adjust, and it totally changes the way you perceive and sense the world. And I found that incredibly telling because as she was telling the story, I'm like, clearly this is a Colorado thing because if I'm in New York and it is dark, I'm not going anywhere near it. like the last thing I would do is be like, oh, it's very dark down there. I should go down and try to sense the world differently. So it really made an impression on me.
Great. Good. Are you done?
Yeah, so I guess the TLDR is like communication comes from you, and like anyone could Google Henry Kissinger on a Google, but it actually mattered because of the story that Ben told. Like facts are only important as they stack up in a sort of pyramid of a story. Wow, that was a terrible metaphor. Cut this. Cut this all. This will not make the final video.
Okay, good.
I like the rolling.
Okay, so we'd like to get we've invited you here. You're going to be performing with most of the folks in this room. This is our show here, except for a handful of folks.
Holy shit.
And it's going to be a good show, by the way. And also we want to know, we're doing climate comedy, but we want to step back and really think about why is it valuable and how do you do it really well? And here are 3 folks that we invited who really do it well. So we'd like to hear first, what is the value from each of you, and you can banter off each other, whatever, but first addressing, what is the value in climate comedy? What does it offer that nothing else can offer? It has these elements that you've already explored in these kind of active workshop ways. But for each one of you, what is it that climate comedy can do that can't be done in other communication forms? What is it that draws it back to you? Why have you used your life, your greatest resource, towards this?
Squandered your one.
So
I would
whoever
say-
feels.
I'll say that the last show that we did last year, we did at New York Comedy Club. Kasha was on the show too, along with 4 other comedians and me. And only about 10% of the people in the audience knew that it was a climate comedy show.
Nice.
90% of the audience just came to see a comedy show, and they ended up with climate comedy. And the comments after the show were all the same. One, that was really fun and funny. 2, I got some good information. I can't believe I'm walking away from a comedy show and I actually learned something. People were waiting, like after the show was over, to come up to me and say how much the show made an impact on them. One guy said, this is the first time I've ever thought about climate change. I've never thought about it, even though you see the news, and he was like, it's too disaster oriented for me. It's just, I don't want to think about it. He was like, but tonight, I actually thought about it for the first time in a way that it wasn't as scary. So like, this was the result of doing climate comedy. And I gotta be honest, I was blown away. I was like, wow, I didn't even think that we would elicit this kind of response from people, but to actually see it happen in real time was beyond rewarding, I have to say.
Yeah, I'll have similar things of what Chuck just said, but I mean, when I started comedy, I started about 10 years ago, and very quickly, I realized that the most valuable thing a person could give me is their time. Even if I'm up on stage for 5 minutes, I want to make sure, because like I can get money in other places, I can get food in other places, right? Yeah. But like even the fact I get money, but the fact that you guys are here right now, I can't pay for your time enough. Like that is something so special that someone would come see me on stage and listen to me without like talking back for 5 minutes, even if it's just 5 minutes. So I wanted to make it worth their while, and I always want my audience to leave with a new perspective on something, whether that's about me and my background or something else that I'm passionate about. Because if you think about it in the broader scheme of comedy, comedy is used to tackle a lot of different issues, race, identity, family, very sensitive topics. And in my head, I was like, well, why can't it be used to communicate difficult science topics like climate change? I think that in my experience, what I've learned is it can have a lot of, Beth and Max have done actual studies showing that, when you students have made this climate communication, you guys feel more empowered to do more climate action, which I think is a huge thing. To me, comedy is a great unifier. I think it's incredible that the same joke can make the President of the United States laugh as like a 4th grader. And what else can you do that can do that? And that's like your thoughts. In my shows that I've done, I run science comedy nights in DC, as well as going to a bunch of different clubs. And I think that's the most valuable part, is when I can sneak science into my stand-up acts when I'm at festivals, clubs that have no business talking about science. And a lot of times I'll see people's faces. When I slip in a science fact, I see people's faces like actually light up, like, whoa, like I didn't know that. And then afterwards, I can't communicate everything in my set, but they will Google stuff afterwards. So it's like I use my science comedy, my climate comedy to whet their appetite to want to know more on their own. So yeah, it's been a really fun decade of doing this, and I'm sure there will be a lot more uses that I'll find out of it as we keep doing it.
And also, if you can, on the camera, can you get the nails?
I was in Mexico for the total solar eclipse, and I got my nails in the different phases of the total solar eclipse.
Yeah.
Oh,
Cool.
wow.
Cool.
It's very classy.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with like The Daily Show, like the early, so I didn't really give a shit about politics for a long time, and like, I was in high school when the Bush-Gore thing was happening, and I was just like, whatever,
Do they know the Bush-Gore thing?
I hope so. I don't know. Is anyone unfamiliar? If I say like the 2000 election, is anyone like, seems like a reasonable election?
They don't know.
It's that they weren't born
awesome.
yet.
I'll just give you the quickest version of this. Okay, so Al Gore and George W. Bush were running for president at the same time. It all came down to the state of Florida, where Al Gore definitely won. But the ballots that they were using were these like fucked up origami crane things that you had to like figure out like, oh, this line is this thing and this line is this thing. And they were so wildly unusable that everyone who was trying to vote for Al Gore accidentally voted for like some third-party whack job candidate. And Al Gore lost by like 500 votes in a district that voted in like thousands and thousands of votes for this third party candidate that no one had ever heard of. And then they're like, obviously this is a mistake, right? And so Al Gore's like, hey, can we like get a recount? And they're like, well, let's ask the governor of Florida, whose brother was George Bush. And he's like, I think George Bush won. You guys. They're like, all right, well, let's go to the Supreme Court, which it was a 5 Republican, 4 Democrat majority. And the Supreme Court's like, got to give it to George Bush. And so that's how George Bush won the 2000 election. The next year was 9/11. It's been a pretty weird 24 years since then. Whatever. I'm not bitter. I'm not mad about it. Anyway, like that was, what was I saying? The Daily Show. I'm sorry. Okay, so I watched an episode of The Daily Show after having not given a shit about politics. And I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And it's about politics, a thing that I didn't think I cared about. And it was then I was like, oh, it's about the communication style. It's about how we're like accessing this information, how the information is being like framed, and the context that we're being given to digest the information. And suddenly I was like, oh, it's interesting and it's impactful and it's important. And it's important to get it right, or else, you know, we get 21 years of shit after something bad happens. And so that's how I got interested in it. So what I've tried to do with the YouTube channel that I started was how do I like try to elicit that same feeling that I got when I was like in 9th grade or 10th grade or whatever, when I first watched The Daily Show, for a new audience. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
And his YouTube channel is Climate Town, and you spent 3 months on an episode about natural gas.
It's all true. It's 40 minutes long. Start with a shorter one. Decide if you want to keep watching. But I just think it's about context and having the right context to understand the information. And the climate change is so big, so like giving the particular context for a particular piece of climate change, like that is, I've found how I can best communicate it. And comedically is you know, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like, I spent $5,000 on improv classes, so I've got to get my money's worth out of that. So I've got to do it comedically.
Cool. So that's the value of climate comedy. But when we go to make climate comedy, it's something that really is grounded in both the art and the science of this, you know, this communication. It's not just a strategic communication. It's not just journalism. There's some art in it. There's some creativity. There's some kind of a storytelling thing, which you all went into. So if you're going to think of like useful approaches or strategies that you use in the creation of climate comedy, what would be some that you would share out that are like, this is really helpful for me? When I go to create climate comedy, these are some useful strategies or approaches that I go to that are kind of like maybe mine or that I got from somebody else that are really useful, that guide you well.
That's tough.
I can go. So I think we've seen this more on TikTok recently. I think
what was that?
That's Chuck's TikTok.
Chuck's dancing.
Follow me.
I think that comedy is all about, you know, diverting expectations. I mean, there's a lot more theory into it that we can all get into, a lot of research on it. But, you know, I think one important part is like you're taking someone down a road and then all of a sudden you make a sharp left turn, and what's that left turn look like? One thing that I like to do is I like to think of a different perspective of what that situation is. I think last year, one of the groups, I think you were in charge, some group was in charge of this, but they were doing a climate ad about polar bears, right?
Yes.
But it was told from the perspective of the polar bear?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I think changing the perspective on that is kind of a fun way where you can get into character, you can be more animated, and no one knows what a polar bear thinks, so you have a lot of creative liberties with that, and that's something that we see a lot with TikTok. People are in different characters. Like some jokes that I have, you know, like cicadas. When the cicadas were out, they would make like all these really, really loud noises, and that was like the mating call. And it's like, well, what if humans did that? And you can kind of act that out. Or
My neighbors do, actually. I live on the hill.
Yeah, she does live on the hill. So this is based off of personal research. Yeah. That's how he got his wife too. Yeah, so I just like shifting the perspective, looking at a situation and thinking about all the different ways that you can tell that same message.
That's funny you say that because I wrote a video sketch about a polar bear, but the polar bear is a polar bear, but he's black, and which you're not gonna find.
Aren't
Yeah,
polar bears black?
yeah, they're
And they just have,
descended they're descended from like brown bears or something.
Everybody's descended from brown bears.
Don't. What is that? You're just encouraging it.
No, actually, their fur is transparent. But, it really is. It's translucent, not transparent. It's translucent. But the idea is, this polar bear was from the inner city, and he was like basically saying, "F you to all of humanity." So this was how he felt about humanity, because all we did was use him as the poster child for climate to raise money, but nobody really, basically he was like, when the last time you actually been to where I live? And that was the whole sketch, really just talking about how we don't frame this issue the way we should, because the truth is, if I could say truthfully, I'm not really worried about polar bears. I mean, I'm just not. I've never seen a polar bear except at a zoo, and that polar bear had very serious emotional problems because it was in a zoo. I'm dead serious. It was sad. It was the first time, it was like one of my first times at a zoo, and as a kid, I remember saying, this whole thing is wrong because of the polar bear. And from that day forward, I never went back to a zoo, and I hated them because of what they were doing to this polar bear. So I can't really connect to the issue via a polar bear, but when you talk about what it does to your own life, and when you frame the issue that way, it's a lot more powerful. Because honestly, when you think about who this is going to affect the most, there's going to be a lot of people who feel like we can engineer our way out of climate. There's a lot of people who feel like, if this house goes down, don't worry, I got another one. And that's their attitude, to be honest, about climate. And for most of us, we can't afford to look at it that way. So loss of habitat, human habitat, that's a big deal. What is the percentage? Is it 67 or 63% of all people live in coastal areas? Yeah. That's unbelievable. And if you saw what happened in New York, just from one storm, the number of people who drowned in basement apartments because the water came in that quickly. That's what climate really is when it affects you personally. And so, framing the issue that way and making it funny, even though what I just said is there's nothing funny about it. But when you frame it from an issue of, your personal involvement, it's a heck of a lot easier.
And I would add on, so the New York City storm that you're talking about, it was from the remnants of Hurricane Ida.
That's right.
And that's not funny, but I think if you look hard enough, you can find aspects that can be pulled out as humorous, because I work in the weather team, so we were writing a lot about that. And we knew ahead of time that this was going to be a problem for New York City. All National Weather Service was saying, hey, you need to get out there and you need to get people away from there, you need to protect the people. But the mayor or governor, whoever was the person in charge, was like
every disaster film,
was like not that concerned about it, or wasn't accurately preparing for it. So then when it happened, they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. We didn't see this coming at all. Right. Whereas all the meteorologists are like, we told you about this. This was actually very accurately forecasted. Yeah. And then the funny thing to me is, afterwards, the person hires his own private meteorologist for the city when we already have a federal system that's very good. Yeah. So to me, that's just like a bit ironic, where it's like, oh, we need a weatherman, but not that weatherman. That one's going to be more accurate.
Jeez. Is this Eric Adams?
I don't know.
No. What's the name? Who was before? It was, I'm sorry, de Blasio.
Yeah.
It was de Blasio.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
I always like the perspective of write what you know.
Very good.
But I don't know shit about a lot of stuff. And so I think part of what I like to do for when I'm trying to write anything climate related is like just learn about it as deeply as possible before I even start writing anything. You know, I think it's like what I a lot of times when, you know, like my comedy friends in New York who are like, oh, I'll try to like break off a little climate comedy. The first thing they do is like Wikipedia climate change and like read the first 3 paragraphs and like try to write some jokes based on sea level rise, and like they're out. Like that's kind of their angle. And I think it's so helpful to like, oh, I actually don't know about carbon capture and sequestration, or like direct air carbon capture. I think there might be something there. So I'll like go learn about all the companies that are doing it, all the subsidies that we're like pouring into it, all the fossil fuel companies that are like promoting it and lobbying for it. And at some point, you learn enough little details that maybe you don't even want to write about direct air carbon capture, you just want to like look into how they plan on sequestering carbon dioxide. And like just your meandering research has gotten you to the point where you understand the topic pretty deeply and you can write comedically about that topic. Because I think it's really, really hard to just like try to riff a bunch of jokes about something that you don't know that much about. And so I just like to really like take a step back and study all the elements of it that I can. Because there's nothing worse than like watching somebody kind of butcher their way through like a kind of touchy subject and get a bunch of shit wrong. I think there's this idea that there's a cancel culture out there, and like, oh, if you say the wrong thing, you'll get canceled forever. And it's like, well, just like know what you're talking about before you just fire off about whatever the fuck you think is happening. And I think like through that lens, I like to like understand what I'm trying to say before I try to write a bunch of jokes about it.
One writing exercise that I used to do when I was starting off, and your bit reminded me of this. It's not quite exactly like that. Yes, obviously reading a lot about it and understanding the material, but you also have to distill it in a way that is very understandable, that you can keep their attention. So I like to think of the premise of a joke as the headline of an article that I'd have to write. It has to have all the important things, who, what, when, why, very quickly. So a writing exercise I used to do, and I encourage you all to do this, is I would look at a newspaper and I would just take the headline, only the headline, and I'd leave that verbatim and I would use that as my premise, and then I'd come up with like 1 to 2 sentence punchline from that, just to see how quickly I can convey a funny message in the shortest amount of time while still being knowledgeable.
That's cool. Nice. So if we're going to just lead by like following the kind of the successful deviant, those moments that are just, they come together, where like climate comedy at its finest, where the art and science comes together and there's just something happening in the room or the video space or the YouTube filming that is just awesome. What is a moment that was just like, really like, that felt good? Do the 3 of you have a moment, and like, what were some of the things that were present in that moment that might have made it so special? Does that bring anything up?
You know, actually, for me, it happened here, one of those moments. So it was a joke that I was thinking about. I didn't want to necessarily be political, because climate is not political. It has been politicized. But the science is just the science. And so while I was here, I was trying to figure out how would I talk about climate change is not political. And I don't know how it happened, but there was something at the time, I think I was watching Fox News for some, like, I always check in with Fox News, because I just got to see, and I hate to say it, how batshit are they right now? Like, I just want to see. But anyway, they were talking about woke this and woke that and woke this, and it made me think of woke weather. And I was like, that's how we get these people to care about climate. we tell them that it's woke weather. And we gotta do something about this woke weather, because woke weather is trying to brainwash our kids. Like, you know. But, you know, for me, I like racy jokes, and I, you know, don't shy away from anatomy jokes. And, you know, I said, why do you think hurricanes always attack Florida? Because they're trying to cut off America's penis. The thing is, you don't know how the joke is going to go. And because I wrote it on the Saturday before, or on the Tuesday before the show, which was Thursday or something like that, I didn't have a chance to test it out, but it worked. Like, you know, everybody got exactly what I was talking about. And so I think for tomorrow, what you guys should keep in mind is don't be concerned about the reaction. Like, that's the easiest way to get thrown off what you're doing. You've practiced this and you have a rhythm from your practice, you know, and so stick to that rhythm. And if people are laughing, then just let that rhythm kind of sit and then continue. But if it doesn't happen, like even if there's silence all the way through, just do your thing and have a good time while you're doing it. And it doesn't make a difference what the reaction is. What I'm saying is don't have an expectation of what the reaction should be. And that goes for just any stand-up that I do. I can't say like, oh, I know this joke always, like, you'll hear comedians do this. They'll do a joke, and it will not get the reaction, and they're like, that always kills.
Yeah.
Like, they're having an internal conversation out loud with the audience, and like, that always kills. Like, what they're saying is, what's wrong with you people? Instead of just accepting the fact that the joke didn't land the way they wanted it to land. So at that point, they're having a whole conversation with the audience that the audience doesn't even know they're involved in. You know, just like, that always kills. Like, what is going on? And the truth is, that's because they had an expectation. So let go of expectation and set your expectations inwardly so that your expectations are from the other people in your sketch group, or if you're doing stand-up, the expectation is, I'm going to have a good time. Because that is infectious. Like, that is something that you transmit whether you think you're transmitting it or not. When you're on stage and you're having a good time, people pick up on that and they respond. So, but if you're on stage and you're just, all you're worried about is like, I wrote this joke and it's got to get a laugh. I wrote this joke and this should get this laugh. Then it's not going to work, you know? So, especially if you haven't had a chance to go out, and every time you see a comedian, all those jokes have been tested. Everybody thinks like they're just getting up there and they're talking and that guy is super funny. He's done those jokes not a million, but many, many times before. They haven't worked. That's how he knows to tell these jokes that are making you laugh right now. You don't have that luxury, so have a good time.
We've done them on each other a little bit, so it helps. We have a few minutes left. Do you guys have a story that you want to?
The prompt is when
The prompt was like one time when it really worked, and what was there that you feel like you can credit it?
Sure. So I live in DC, but I perform at a lot of different places. I run science comedy nights, but the majority of comedy that I do is not for science audiences. One time I had a gig in this place called Mechanicsville, which accurately describes what the town was. And it was a Mexican restaurant that turned into a comedy club. And by turned into a comedy club, they just turned down the lights and like put you in front of the restaurant. And this is very common. I performed at a lot of different restaurants. Chinese restaurants are very popular, Mexican restaurants. And I go up there, people before me, they did like pretty dirty jokes, and I'm not a very dirty comedian. And I remember going up there and being like, who likes science? And there was so much silence, and the person in the front row goes, do we look like a crowd that likes science? And I was like, in my head, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I pivoted because that's like kind of, I only have science jokes. So in my head, like in real time, I'm like, all right, let's think about the science jokes that are going to work for them. And that guy was laughing his ass off by the end of the night because I did my science jokes and I was able to tailor it to them. So since that moment, I've learned that people do like science. They just, you have to figure out how you can approach it and give it to them. So that was like a really cool moment. I talk a little bit more about that in my TEDx talk, sneaking science into stand-up, and I have data that backs it up of like science jokes versus non-science jokes and what audiences it works well with. But that was a really cool moment where I was like, well, because other people who weren't doing science jokes also, like, they weren't doing well. So to me, it was just like a really cool moment that you just know your audience and you can make any topic work with any audience, no matter what their demographic.
That's awesome. This doesn't quite fit the prompt, but I'm really psyched about it, so I'm gonna say it anyway. Before I started doing a YouTube version of this show, I dressed up, and I cannot believe how much I'm talking about Al Gore right now, but like I would dress up as Al Gore. He was big into climate change, this whole thing. And so I would dress up as Al Gore and do like an Al Gore themed talk show where I would have like comedians from SNL and like Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and like they'd come on, and then a climate expert would come on, and it was like a live show. And I would sometimes get a climate scientist who knew Al Gore on the show, and they were like, this is really weird for me because like you're dressed up as a friend of mine and like he doesn't know you're doing this. And, like, I'm like, I know, sorry. And then, so I was doing that show for a couple years, and then I submitted a video for the Inside the Greenhouse, and like in 2016, I think I won the video thing for $300.
Woo!
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so anyway, I was doing that show, and then like the COVID pandemic kind of shut it down, and then I pivoted to online. So I hadn't done that show in a long time. And then Al Gore's climate conference called the Climate Reality Project emailed me and was like, hey, we like your YouTube. Do you want to come on to the conference and like do something at the conference? And so we just like worked it out. And 2 nights ago, I reprised for the last time the Al Gore role and had Al Gore come out and like talk to Al Gore as Al Gore.
Nice.
It was the weirdest dream come true. It felt really cool, but it's also like, I don't know, it was a very surreal moment to talk to the former vice president. He used to be vice president for Bill Clinton. You guys remember that guy? No, you don't, but you heard of him? Cool. The blowjob in the White House guy. that was everybody knows it. Yeah. Anyway, it's like
They're gonna
Google it right now. Yeah. No, it was like really surreal to like have this kind of like loop closed in the way that I really wanted it to end. Anyway, so that felt like something coming together climate-wise.
Did he appreciate your comedy? What was his?
I think so. He's like a billion times smarter than me. So my bit was like, I'm you, and then you come out, and he's like, I get it. And he's like, he was so cool the whole time. Like, he was like really sharp. And the first thing I asked him was like, what advice would you give to like a young Al Gore? And he was like, well, probably don't do a talk show with yourself as the host. And the audience was like, yeah! And I was just like, that sounded like a burn, but it seemed like maybe a compliment. I don't know, he's great. He's awesome.
That's great. Okay, it is so beautiful outside, nobody can even believe it. And it's still in the afternoon, and we are at time. So I'm not gonna drag it over time. So I would just like to thank everybody who has arrived. I'd like to thank our film crew. Thank you so much for capturing all of this for us. Thanks to Chuck and to Kasha and to Raleigh for being here.